Shadows and silk the loom clacked rhythmically in the corner of the small apartment as Nora Calloway worked, her fingers dancing across the warp and weft with practiced precision. Outside, rain tapped against the windows of the converted warehouse, space in Portland's industrial district creating a gentle percussion that accompanied her work. At 32, Nora had spent nearly a decade perfecting her textile techniques, combining traditional weaving methods with experimental materials that responded to light and temperature. Still at it, Vincent's voice broke her concentration. As he entered their shared living space, shaking raindrops from his camera bag, Vincent Mercer moved through the world with the confidence of someone who believed his eye captured truth that others missed. At 35, his architectural photography had begun appearing in respected design magazines, though not yet with the prominence he craved. "I'm finishing the commission for the Westbrook Gallery," Nora replied, not looking up from the iridescent threads that shifted between blue and violet as they caught the light. "They want to display it next month." Vincent made a non-committal sound as he unpacked his equipment. "Gallery displays are nice, but when are you going to work on something with real impact? These art pieces are beautiful, but they're just decorative." The word stung, as it always did. Decorative. As though beauty without function was somehow lesser. As though her exploration of how fabrics could transform spaces through light and movement was merely ornamental. "Not everything needs to be utilitarian to have value," Nora said quietly, a conversation they'd had countless times before. "Besides, I'm working on something new, textile that changes opacity with temperature variations. It could revolutionize how we think about curtains, room dividers, even clothing." Vincent approached, kissing the top of her head perfunctorily. "That sounds interesting. Just don't get lost in the fantasy of it all. The real world runs on practical solutions and connections with the right people." Nora swallowed her frustration. Vincent had always been her opposite in that way, where she saw possibility in experimentation. He focused on networking and visibility. His photography captured buildings in ways that flattered their architects, earning him goodwill with influential designers. He was strategic where she was intuitive. Later that evening, as they shared dinner at their small kitchen table, Vincent could barely contain his excitement. "Haruki Tanaka's firm reviewed my portfolio," he announced, naming one of the most prominent sustainable architects in the world. "They're looking for someone to document their next 3 international projects: Bangkok, Singapore, and Dubai. 3 years of work, all expenses paid. And exclusive rights to photograph some of the most innovative buildings being constructed today." Nora's fork paused midway to her mouth. 3 years. That's ... a long time to be away. Vincent leaned forward, eyes bright with ambition. "Is my chance, Nora? Do you understand what this would mean for my career? These would be the defining projects of the next decade." "It's wonderful," she said, meaning it despite the sudden hollowness in her chest. "When would you leave?" His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "In 2 weeks, but there's something else." He hesitated, looking down at his plate. "Tanaka has certain expectations about his team. He wants total dedication, no distractions." Nora set her fork down, suddenly understanding. Distractions. Expects complete immersion. No family attachments for the duration of the project. It's unconventional, but that's how he works. His team becomes like a nomadic family. "So I'm the distraction," Nora said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "It's not personal, it's professional. It's the opportunity comes once in a lifetime." That night, as Vincent slept, Nora sat at her loom, hands trembling slightly as she worked. She had always believed their different approaches to creativity complemented each other. Now, she realized that Vincent had never seen their paths as parallel journeys, but as fundamentally unequal endeavors. A week later, surrounded by half-packed boxes, Vincent finally said what had been growing increasingly obvious. "I need to take this opportunity, Nora. You understand that, right? Your work is beautiful, but mine, ... Mine could change how people see architecture forever. My work could change things too," she said softly, "if you could just see its potential." Vincent looked at her with something between pity and impatience. "You're still dreaming of possibilities. I'm building something real." When he left, taking his cameras and ambition with him, Nora stood in their half-empty apartment, surrounded by her looms and threads and unfinished ideas. The silence felt both crushing and strangely liberating. She ran her fingers over a swatch of her temperature-responsive fabric, watching as it shifted from opaque to translucent under her touch. Something real, she whispered to herself, a quiet determination settling over her. If Vincent couldn't see the substance in her dreams, perhaps it was time to show the world instead. The empty frame the first month after Vincent's departure. Nora moved through her apartment like a ghost, haunting spaces that still held echoes of their shared life. His absence left negative space, a coffee mug no longer on the counter, an empty hook where his camera bag once hung, silence where his critiques used to fill the air. She found herself staring at blank walls where his photographs had once dominated, leaving behind only rectangular shadows on the paint. One rainy afternoon, Nora stood before one such empty space, running her fingers along the faded outline. "Something real," she murmured, echoing Vincent's parting words. The phrase had embedded itself in her consciousness, a splinter she couldn't remove. Turning away from the wall, she faced her workroom, the looms, spindles, and baskets of experimental fibers she'd collected over years. Among them sat her latest project, a fabric that responded to environmental conditions, changing its properties based on temperature, humidity, and light. Vincent had dismissed it as impractical, but Nora suddenly saw its potential with new clarity. That evening, she called her friend Josephine Rivera, an environmental engineer who had always shown interest in Nora's work. "I need your perspective on something," Nora said, when Josephine arrived, spreading out samples of her responsive textile. "These fabrics change opacity and thermal properties based on environmental conditions. I've been thinking of them as art pieces, but what if they could be more?" Josephine examined the swatches, her expression shifting from curiosity to excitement. "Nora, do you realize what you've created? Building facades account for massive energy consumption. A responsive exterior, material that could regulate temperature and light penetration without mechanical systems." She looked up, eyes wide. "This isn't just art. This could revolutionize sustainable architecture." The word "darkitecture" sent a painful twinge through Nora's chest. Vincent's domain. But instead of retreating, she leaned forward. "Tell me." Moreover, the following weeks, Nora's apartment transformed. The empty spaces Vincent left behind, filled with technical drawings, material samples, and research papers. Josephine introduced her to colleagues at the Sustainable Design Institute, who were intrigued by her prototypes. What had begun as artistic exploration evolved into rigorous development of a new class of architectural textiles 3 months after Vincent's departure. Nora received a call from Dr. Rajiv Patel, a leading researcher in sustainable building materials. "Callaway, your responsive textile prototype is unlike anything I've seen," he said. "With refinement, this could become a significant innovation in passive building systems. Would you consider a development partnership with our institute?" The opportunity came with resources Nora had never had access to: laboratory space, technical assistance, and a modest grant. She accepted immediately, taking leave from her part-time teaching position at the local arts college to focus on development. The work consumed her days and nights, where once she had created beautiful but singular pieces. Now she thought in systems and scales, how her textiles could envelop entire buildings, responding dynamically to changing conditions. Her artistic sensibility merged with technical specifications, creating something neither art nor engineering alone could achieve. 6 months into development, during a late-night session at the Institute's lab, Nora experienced a breakthrough. By incorporating a particular type of recycled polymer into her weave, she created a fabric that not only changed opacity, but also generated small amounts of electricity through temperature differentials. The textile became both responsive membrane and energy producer. "We need to patent this immediately," Dr. Patel said when she demonstrated the prototype. "This goes beyond architectural aesthetics. It's a technological innovation with significant commercial applications." That night, as Nora walked home through the quiet streets, she paused to look up at the illuminated buildings against the night sky. She imagined them wrapped in her living textiles, breathing with the environment, generating their own energy through nothing but clever design. For the first time since Vincent left, she felt a sense of possibility that overwhelmed the lingering pain of his absence. The patent application for what she called bioresponsive architectural membrane, or BRAM, was filed the following week. 3 weeks later, an unexpected email arrived from Eleanor Whitman, founder of Whitman Sustainable Ventures, one of the country's leading investors in green technology. "I have reviewed your patent application," the email began. "I believe your innovation represents exactly the kind of breakthrough our built environment needs. I'd like to discuss bringing this to market with you at the helm." As Nora read the email, her phone buzzed with a text message from Josephine. "Have you seen Architecture Forward magazine this month? Tanaka's Bangkok project is featured. Vincent's photos are ... Well, you should see for yourself." Nora hesitated, then opened her laptop and found the digital edition. Vincent's photographs captured Tanaka's building from dramatic angles, emphasizing its bold lines and innovative form. The images were technically perfect and utterly soulless. They showed the building as an object, not as a living part of its environment. There was no humanity, no sense of how the space felt to inhabit. Closing the magazine, Nora returned to Eleanor Whitman's email and began composing her reply. Vincent had chased what he thought was real.
Oh no.
Nora would create something that truly lived and breathed. Threads of change 1 year after Vincent's departure. Nora stood in the cavernous space of what would become the headquarters of Callaway Environmental Textiles, the converted warehouse in Portland's industrial district, just blocks from her former apartment code, with the sounds of construction as workers installed specialized equipment for producing her bioresponsive architectural membrane at scale. Eleanor Whitman had moved with remarkable speed, securing $8 million in venture capital funding based on the strength of Nora's patents and prototypes. The investment came with expectations that would have terrified Nora a year earlier: production targets, market penetration goals, and a 3-year plan for profitability. Now, she embraced these challenges with a focus that surprised even herself.
Oh.
"First production run needs to be flawless," Nora told Josephine, who had left her engineering position to become CTO of the new venture. "The Solaris project in Seattle will be our proof of concept. If we can demonstrate energy savings of at least 30% compared to traditional facades, the projections show we'll exceed that," Josephine replied, reviewing data on her tablet. "The question is whether we can scale production quickly enough to meet demand once word gets out." That question was answered 3 months later, when the first installation of BRAM on the Solaris building was completed. The 10-story structure seemed to shimmer in the changing light, its facade shifting from translucent to opaque as clouds passed overhead. More impressively, the building's energy consumption dropped by 42% in the first month of operation. Architectural journals clamored for information. Sustainable building blogs featured daily updates on the Solaris project's performance. Within weeks, Callaway Environmental Textiles had pre-orders from development projects in Chicago, Austin, and Toronto. On the evening of the Solaris project's official unveiling, Nora stood among a crowd of architects, developers, and environmental advocates, watching as the building responded to the setting sun, its western face becoming more opaque to reduce heat gain, while the eastern side remained transparent, maximizing natural light until the last possible moment. "It's like the building is breathing," murmured a well-known architect standing nearby. "I've never seen anything like it." Eleanor appeared at Nora's side, champagne flute in hand. "We've received 3 more major project inquiries just during this event," she said quietly, including one from Haruki Tanaka's firm. Nora's pulse quickened. "Tanaka, for which project?" "The Singapore development. Apparently, he's dissatisfied with the current facade solution. His team reached out directly after seeing the performance data from Solaris." That night, Nora dreamed of Vincent photographing a building wrapped in her textiles, unable to capture its essence because it kept changing, responding to the environment in ways his static images couldn't contain. She woke feeling both vindicated and strangely hollow. The Tanaka commission became reality 2 months later. Atea found herself in Singapore, standing in the tropical heat as construction crews began installing brand panels on what would become one of the most visible buildings in the city's skyline. The project that had taken Vincent away from her would now showcase her innovation instead. "We need to document this properly," Eleanor said as they watched the installation. "Not just technical specifications, but the visual impact, the way it transforms the urban landscape. We should commission a photographer who can capture the living quality of the facades." Nora thought of Vincent, whose stark architectural photographs had always prioritized form over feeling. "I know exactly what we need," she replied. "Not architectural photography in the traditional sense. We need someone who can capture transformation. The building is a process, not an object." She hired Tomas Fernandez, a photographer known for his time-lapse work documenting natural phenomena. His images of the Singapore installation showing the building responding to a tropical storm, shifting from morning to night, breathing with its environment, became the cornerstone of Callaway's visual identity. 18 months after Vincent's departure, Nora's company employed 73 people across research, production, and installation divisions. Brahm Facades adorned 17 buildings worldwide, with 30 more in development. Architectural Digest featured her on its cover. Standing before the Chicago installation, her expression serene but determined. Under the headline, "The Woman Who Taught Buildings to Breathe." That evening, as Nora packed for a flight to Dubai where she would oversee installation on what would become the world's largest application of her technology, her phone chimed with an email notification. The sender's name made her freeze. Vincent Mercer. "I saw your work on the Singapore project," the message read. "Impressive. I'm completing my assignment with Tanaka soon. Perhaps we could meet when I'm back in Portland. There's a new gallery. Interested in showcasing my documentation of the 3 projects?" Nora stared at the screen, feeling a complex wave of emotions: vindication, lingering hurt, and something unexpected: indifference. Vincent's approval, which she had once craved, now seemed irrelevant to the reality she had built. She closed the email without replying and continued packing for Dubai. The world was changing. She was changing it thread by thread, building by building, skyline by skyline. Skyline Symphony, the Dubai installation, marked a turning point for Callaway Environmental Textiles. The 70-story tower, sheathed entirely in brand panels, dominated the city's already spectacular skyline with its subtly shifting facade. During day, the building adjusted continuously to the harsh desert sun, minimizing heat gain while maximizing natural light. At night, it became a canvas for gentle waves of bioluminescence, an additional feature Nora had developed that eliminated the need for external lighting while creating a mesmerizing visual display. Global media coverage was immediate and overwhelming. CNN featured a time-lapse video of the building responding to a rare desert rainstorm, its surface seeming to ripple with joy at the moisture. Architectural journals published special issues dedicated to what they called responsive architecture. Sustainability experts calculated the reduced carbon footprint equivalent to removing 3,000 cars from the road annually for a single building. 2 years after Vincent had walked away from their relationship, Nora found herself addressing the United Nations Climate Summit, explaining how widespread adoption of responsive building technologies could significantly reduce urban energy consumption worldwide. "The buildings we construct are not static objects," she told the assembled world leaders. "They are living participants in our environment. When we design them to respond rather than resist, to adapt rather than overcome, we create harmony instead of conflict between our built and natural worlds." Her words resonated beyond the summit. Orders flooded in from government projects, corporate headquarters, and cultural institutions across 6 continents. Callaway Environmental Textiles expanded rapidly. Opening production facilities in Europe and Asia, Nora assembled specialized installation teams who traveled the globe, transforming skylines from Toronto to Tokyo, Sydney to Sao Paulo. The company's success brought Nora unexpected personal attention. Forbes named her to their 40 Under 40 list. Time magazine included her among the 100 most influential people in their annual issue. Her name became synonymous with sustainable innovation, her face recognized at international conferences and design events. Through it all, Nora remained focused on evolution both of her technology and herself. Established the Callaway Foundation, which provided grants to artists exploring the intersection of textiles and environmental science. She funded scholarships for women in sustainable technology fields. Her personal aesthetic evolved as well. From the quiet textile artist Vincent had dismissed to a confident industry leader whose wardrobe featured custom pieces incorporating her responsive fabrics. On a crisp autumn morning, exactly 2 years after Vincent's departure, Nora stood in Times Square, watching as workers completed the installation of a massive Bram display on the Reuters building. Unlike previous installations, this one was specifically designed as a communications medium, a living, it's a breathing digital billboard that used a fraction of the energy of traditional LED displays while providing more nuanced visual experiences. As she observed the final panels being secured, her phone rang. It was Josephine. "Have you heard?" Josephine asked without preamble. "Vincent's back in Portland. Apparently the Tanaka project ended early. There are rumors that his work didn't meet expectations for the final phase." Nora watched as the Times Square installation came to life, its surface rippling with subtle patterns that responded to the ambient noise and movement of the crowded square. "Is that so?" she replied, surprised by her own detachment. Vincent's career trajectory no longer seemed relevant to her story. "There's more," Josephine continued. "He's applied for the documentation project with the Portland Urban Renewal Initiative. You know, it's the one where they're retrofitting those 10 downtown buildings with our technology." Now, Nora felt a flicker of something, not quite anger, not quite amusement, but a complex blend of both. "So he wants to photograph my work. Ironic, isn't it?" Josephine paused. "The selection committee wants your input since Callaway is the primary technology provider." That evening, in her hotel suite overlooking Manhattan, Nora reviewed the applicants for the Portland documentation project. Vincent's portfolio was impressive in its technical perfection. His images of Tanaka's Bangkok and Singapore projects showcased immaculate composition and lighting, yet something crucial was missing. They failed to capture the living quality of the buildings, their relationship with their surroundings, their impact on human experience. Beside his application was one from Tomas Fernandez, whose work for Callaway had helped define the visual language of responsive architecture. His images breathed and moved even in still frames, capturing the essence of buildings as participants in urban ecosystems rather than isolated. Monuments.Nora composed her recommendation to the selection committee with careful consideration. She acknowledged Vincent's technical expertise, while noting that the project required a photographer who could capture evolutionary processes rather than static forms. She recommended Fernandez without explicitly rejecting Vincent, allowing the committee to draw their own conclusions. 3 days later, as Nora's plane descended toward Portland International Airport, she gazed out the window at her home city. The downtown skyline was beginning its transformation. With 2 buildings already sheathed in her textiles and 8 more in process, from this distance, they appeared to pulse gently, like beacons, signaling a new approach to urban development. As the plane touched down, her phone chimed with a message from Eleanor. Portland committee selected Fernandez for the documentation project. Also, your Times Square installation has gone viral. 50 million views of the time-lapse video in 24 hours. The Reuters CEO wants to discuss expanding the technology to their other properties worldwide. Nora smiled and looked out at the Portland skyline once more. Vincent had once told her she was still dreaming while he chased real success. Now, her dreams had reshaped skylines across the globe. While his pursuit of success had led him back to where he started, the irony wasn't lost on her. But neither was it satisfying in the way she might once have imagined. She had moved beyond needing his recognition or regretting his absence. She had become something he couldn't have envisioned. Not just successful, but transformative. Reflections of the Portland Art Museum's exhibition Responsive Environments opened on a rainy evening in late autumn, drawing crowds despite the weather. The main gallery had been transformed into an immersive experience, its walls and ceiling covered with Nora's earliest experimental textiles alongside the latest generation of Bram technology. Visitors moved through spaces that breathed and shifted around them, responding to their presence with subtle changes in opacity, color, and texture. In a smaller side gallery, photography documented the global impact of responsive architecture. Tomas Fernandez's images dominated the space-time lapse sequences, showing Callaway-wrapped buildings responding to weather, light, and human activity across 6 continents. The photographs captured what made Bram revolutionary: buildings that participated in their environments rather than standing apart from them. Nora moved through the exhibition in a midnight blue dress, woven with threads that subtly shifted hue with her body temperature and movementa. Wearable version of her architectural innovation. Museum patrons recognized her, approaching with congratulations and questions about future developments. Architectural students asked for autographs. Sustainability advocates thanked her for changing the conversation about energy consumption in the built environment. As she turned a corner into a smaller exhibition space, Nora stopped abruptly. On the far wall hung a series of photographs she hadn't seen before. Stark, high-contrast black and white images of buildings under construction. The jolt of recognition, she realized they were Vincent's photographs from the Tanaka projects, displayed as a comparative study alongside Fernandez's work. And there, standing before them, was Vincent himself. He had changed in subtle ways, thinner, with new lines around his eyes and a slight stoop to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He wore an expensive suit that seemed slightly too large, as though he had lost weight recently. When he turned and saw her, his expression flickered between surprise, admiration, and something that might have been regret. "Nora," he said, his voice softer than she remembered, "I was hoping I might see you here." She approached slowly, aware of other exhibition visitors, watching their interaction with curious glances. "Vincent, I didn't know your work would be included in the exhibition. A last-minute addition," he replied. The curator wanted to create a dialogue between different approaches to architectural documentation. He gestured toward the comparison with Fernandez's vibrant, living images. "I have to admit, the contrast is instructive." Nora studied the photographs. Vincent's work was exactly as she remembered, technically perfect, compositionally strong, utterly devoid of the life that made buildings more than mere structures. Beside them, Fernandez's images of the same buildings, now wrapped in her textiles, seemed to pulse with vitality. "Our technology has changed everything," Vincent said after a moment. "I've been trying to photograph the retrofitted buildings downtown, but they keep changing on me. By the time I set up a shot, the light shifts, or a cloud passes, and the facade responds. It's like trying to photograph a living organism." "That's exactly what they are," Nora replied. "Living systems, not static objects." Vincent nodded slowly. "I should have seen it what you were working toward. When you showed me those early prototypes, I thought—" He trailed off, seeming to search for words. "You thought they were just decorative?" Nora finished for him. "Not real work, not like your photography." He flinched slightly at her directness. "I was wrong, obviously." We gestured around the exhibition. "Your vision has literally changed skylines worldwide. Meanwhile, He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Well, let's just say the Tanaka project didn't end as I'd hoped. My approach wasn't what he wanted for the Dubai phase." Nora felt a complicated emotion rise within her, not satisfaction at his failure, but a kind of clarity about the distance they had traveled from each other. "I've been thinking about approaching Callaway," Vincent continued. "Your company must need architectural documentation. With my experience, we work exclusively with Tomas Fernandez now," Nora interrupted gently. "His approach aligns with our vision of buildings as living systems." Vincent's face fell slightly. "Of course, I understand." A small silence fell between them, filled with the ambient sounds of the exhibition murmuring visitors. The subtle sounds of the responsive textiles adjusting to changing conditions in the gallery. "You were right to leave," Nora said finally, surprising herself with the realization as she spoke it. "We wanted different things, needed different things. Your leaving forced me to see possibilities I might never have pursued otherwise." Vincent looked at her for a long moment. "I don't think I was right," he said quietly. "I think I was afraid of standing still while you moved forward, of being overshadowed by what you might become." He glanced around the exhibition. "And look what you've become." A museum staff member approached, apologetically interrupting. Ms. Calloway, the director, would like to begin your presentation in the main gallery. The mayor has arrived. Nora nodded, then turned back to Vincent. I should go. Congratulations, Nora, he said. Truly, you've created something extraordinary. As she turned to leave, Vincent called after her. That night when I said you were still dreaming while I was chasing real success, Nora paused, looking back at him. I was wrong about which of us was doing which, he finished. She held his gaze for a moment, then smiled slightly. We were both dreaming, Vincent. The difference is, I built my dreams into reality. Walking away, moving toward the crowded main gallery, where she would speak about the future of responsive architecture. Nora felt a sense of completion. The pain of Vincent's departure, once so acute, had transformed into something else, a catalyst that had propelled her forward into creating. Something larger than either of them could have imagined alone. Outside the museum, rain fell on a city whose skyline was slowly transforming, building by building, into a living, breathing ecosystem of responsive structures. Nora's vision, once dismissed as merely decorative, now rose 40 stories high against the night sky, shimmering with possibility. Not just art, not just technology, something new, something real, a dream made tangible, changing the world one thread at a time.